one vote per election or per race, and that's your vote, and whoever gets the most votes wins. Or it's a little more complicated than that, but so both of these different voting methods that they're going to be talking about tonight, which is more about how you actually vote than what you're voting on, they both have to do with being able to actually choose more than one, or in some cases nobody at all, instead of just being forced to choose one person that you think is the best. So they'll get into detail about exactly how these work and why one is better or might be better than the other. So without anything else, Arthur will be going first with approval voting.
I want y'all to be able to see the TVs. Is it if I stand right here, or do you want me to move the table over there?
You can.
Okay. All right. Okay, the keyboard works. All right, I'm going to talk about approval voting, which is just one of the many methods that we have besides plurality voting right now. But before I get into it, I want to ask yourself this question: Why do we vote? I mean, what's the purpose? We all know we elect candidates. That's a simple purpose of voting. But what are we really doing when we vote? And that's what I want you to think about when we go through when James and I talk about this. And voting is really expressing our opinion. We do that in lots of other ways. We do it in our entire life. When you go to the grocery store, when you do hobbies, when you do everything, you're expressing your opinion or your desire for what you want in your life and in the world. And usually you have lots of options. You're not limited by anything. Like you go to the grocery store, you have tons of options to choose from, and you express what you want by buying it. Well, that's a great way to say what you want in the world. And we're not usually, when we do this, when you go to the grocery store, you're not worried about choices other people are making, right? You just know what you want, and you want variety. If you suddenly went to the grocery store and they had Frosted Flakes and something else, you would be upset. You say, where do my options go? Because it'd be upsetting just to have two options. Or even three or whatever. You want variety, you want choice. So voting is our ability to express our choice and our opinions of what we want. Now, in the political realm, we should want to maximize that, right? To be fair to us, you want to maximize your ability to express your opinion. But we have a system right now that doesn't do that. So this is our goal, to maximize expressing our opinion in the political realm. Because two options, is anyone here satisfied with the two options? Would you like more options in the political world?
Yeah.
So our goal is to maximize expression. Now, approval voting is, well, there's all these things I'll go over, but approval voting is the answer I think that is the best fit for, if we're going to choose a system to change to, I think it is the best option. And there's lots of voting types. Like these are all different voting types, and some of them have weird names. But approval voting, and I'll go into explanation why in a little bit, but approval voting I think is the best option given the problems we have with our current system. Now, and that's what I want to go into next is, well, I want to say that this is confusing, and I'm not going to go into voting math or anything like this, but the reason I'm showing this is there's tons of criteria out there for what is the best voting system. And the red and the green is good and bad, right? So there's no perfect system. No one can claim that there's a perfect voting system. But we have to choose, maybe subjectively, what is the best voting system that we can fight for to change from what we have now. So I'm going to go over our current voting system, which is plurality voting, which means you have a single winner and the majority wins. That's our current system, and I'm going to go over the things that are wrong with it so that we can see what we need to fix, because most of us don't analyze our current voting system. We just do it. We don't really think about the problems. And this is also called first past the post and single choice voting. There are other names for it. But you only get to express yourself on our current plurality ballots once. You get to, in a race, a single race, you make a mark, that's your expression, and you get to do that every 2 years. So with all the issues that are involved in a race and your representatives that you're picking, you get to make one mark that represents all the issues that we economic issues, social issues, all that's represented in a single mark every 2 years. So that's an obvious problem we want to fix. And these people, in the Colorado ballot in the 2012 elections, had the most presidential options out of any state. And they had this many people to pick from. And then they could only express their choice once. They could only pick one of these people to say is worthy for that office. They couldn't say anyone else might be worthy to take that office. Now, I want to mention this briefly. This is a statistical term. I'm not going to go real deep in it or anything. I just want to give the idea of opportunity lost. How happy or satisfied you are with the vote and how simple it is. And that's what this graph shows, for simplicity and satisfaction. And some people did a mathematical study and they came up with this chart. And here's approval voting and here's instant runoff voting, but here's our current voting system. So it's way down on group satisfaction and it's about here on simplicity. I mean, it's pretty simple to make a single mark. But over here, the simplest version, but the least satisfying is random choice. No one has a choice if we just randomly let a computer test it. It's pretty simple to do that, but not very satisfying. But over here, approval voting, I just want to show is more satisfying to people, and it's very simple to use. It's basically like our current system as far as simplicity. Now, a lot of what I want to talk about is Duverger's law. He's a French scholar, and he went over the problems of our basically the plurality voting system and how it encourages two-party races. The first part talks about proportional voting, which we're not going to go into. Basically, that's how they do it in Europe, where if you get 15%, you get 15% of representation in Parliament or something like that. We're not going to fight for that now. But the second part is the psychological factor. Are you free to express yourself on the ballot? And that's a lot of the problem we have now with our current system. People aren't free. There's a game there. The spoiler effect, the game of, well, the lesser of evils, that idea, you're tied to other people's decisions. You're not free to express yourself. So you're stuck with groupthink, and plurality ends up winning out. Now, I want to go through this really quick to show you how Duverger's law basically works out. So we have an animal kingdom. All these people are in an election, right? All these animals. And that's how their first election turns out. Now you have these people that are most popular, and you only get one vote in this. So if you go with the majority vote, leopard wins this. And the majority of the people, they lose. Their opinions are lost. Their expression is lost. Oops. So what we have is these candidates know they're in the minority. So they want to retain their power, and they notice who the majorities are. So they start moving and migrating towards majority parties, and they end up losing. Their expression is lost, and they end up dropping out of the race. The 7-party system's turned into 5 now. And in the future, what's important to note too is these AL voters, who are more moderate voters. They're the kind of people that could be swayed either way. So, and these bigger parties know it too. And they say, well, we're going to scare the AL voters and try to swing them our way. So the AL voters get split up, those parties getting power, and you end up with 4 parties. And now you have these leftovers that know they're not going to win now. And now they're scared. They say, so we better take our sides and join our camps. So you end up like this, and you end up with your 2-party system. So that's basically how Duverger's law works. Now the moderate AL voters are still there, and they're constantly voting in each election, so that's why you get the bouncing back and forth. Republicans, Democrats, Republicans, Democrats. That's how that works. So you end up with these 2 parties, but the majority will or expression is never satisfied. You have the majority of the people that never really get what they want or the ability to express what they want. You're stuck with these smaller groups that have taken the majority. Now the spoiler effect is something we're all aware of. It's when the third party candidate comes in and they get blamed. So we're familiar with that, the getting blamed for messing up an election. And that's a current problem with plurality voting. And another smaller issue is spoiled ballots. Now you can have different types of spoiled ballots. You can have someone that just messes up their ballot on purpose. If that's thrown out, there's nothing you can do about that. You can have ballots that are confusing, and what if someone marks two of these? Well, they've invalidated their ballot. And this one is an RV ballot, and if someone goes and marks all for George Washington, the first one might be counted as valid, but they've also gone and spoiled their ballot with successive rounds of voting. So I'm going to explain approval voting. How does approval voting solve this problem? So you basically just pick who you want on the ballot. You make your marks, and that's all there is to it. And you can change. There's as many people there are, there's combinations on the ballot to choose from. And basically the person with the most votes wins, and that's it. So you've solved a lot of the problems. No Bayesian regret. You're satisfied, it's simple. The Vergès law's gone away, you're free to psychologically express your vote. You can actually put your political will on the ballot. There's no splitting vote, lesser of evils issue is gone. And another thing is it's cheap to implement. Our systems now, basically, all you have to do is allow for overvoting. Our current ballots will handle it just fine. They already recognize overvoting. And you never get worse results. So why not IRV, since I'm debating James? Well, the Bayesian regret chart, if you remember, showed it's not as simple, and you still have the Vergès law in play there. It's more complicated, but it's still there. And you can have spoiled ballots because people could mark them incorrectly. It requires a centralized counting system. You can't count locally in a little precinct or a little area. You have to get all the votes, gather them together, and do the final count. And it looks something like that. I know you can't see this, but this was an actual tabulation done in, I forget where, but it confused the crud out of people. No one liked it, and they were very unhappy with it. And you have weird potential spoiler effects from it too. I'm going to go this really quick because I'm almost out of time. But say you have good and bad, good, bad, ideal. You want to use plurality voting, and this is a spoiler, again. So IRV is going to save the day, right? You move over, they win again. But if your candidate does really well, like the Libertarian Party wants to do, well, you actually make them lose. Now these people are second round of voting, and if a small fraction of those voters, decide to switch, you've actually made the bad guy win again, and we still get blamed for spoiler. So that's why majority's rule's still in effect, and I won't go over the rest because I'm out of time, but hopefully I'll ask questions, and thank everybody for listening. I'm going to switch James's presentation.
So now you kind of, Arthur kind of went over a little bit about what both of those were and how they work. Now James is going to go a little bit more in depth with the IRV voting, instant runoff voting.
It's going
and he's going to argue why that one is better. So James.
Oh gosh, where is it?
We're just going to start off with.
Wait, where's your presentation?
Oh, it's under documents, politics,
It's a maze.
and then PowerPoint. I just want to start off with, hey, how awesome is this? Daniel Behrman put this together.
Yes.
The most awesome graphics guy we've ever had.
Hey, Daniel.
Daniel Behrman.
Okay, they should get that in our archives.
Oh, absolutely. Do that.
No.
Okay, we got this. We do the old check. Forward, backwards. Alright, it's working. So I'll do the same thing as Art and stand off to the side. So, are we, did I say when we started or have we started?
We started.
I did start already. I didn't have it up
You're
yet.
35
Redo it.
seconds in.
Redo it. Doesn't count until I start, because I have the time perfect.
Wait a minute. Is everybody okay with him
Yes.
Yes.
giving Daniel a plug for free?
Yes.
You know, I
Daniel
get to
deserves
say
a plug.
when we started. Alright, we started.
Okay. Go.
Fellow Toastmasters, thank you for your attention. Tonight, I will be presenting the case for why instant runoff voting is superior to approval voting. First, I'll explain the two different voting methods, and then I'll tell you the 4 reasons why instant runoff voting is 1,000,000 times better than approval voting. Why IRV is 1,000,000 times better. Right there. Okay, first, instant runoff voting is basically this. From the voter side of things, all you have to do in a multiple candidate election is rank the candidates in order of preference. First, second, third, etc. And it goes on down. If there's 20 people there, you get to rank 19 of them because it doesn't matter what the last place is. But on the back side, this is why it's instant runoff voting and not just ranked choice voting, is you count all the first choices. If someone gets a majority in the first choice that everyone has, then that person wins. There's no instant runoff. However, when there's not a majority, that's when instant runoff kicks in. Because then you eliminate whoever has the least amount of votes, and then you transfer their vote to their next preference. And you keep on doing that until someone achieves majority. And then, of course, the majority wins, thus upholding the majority rules concept of democracy. Approval voting is basically this, and Art explained it. Instead of just voting for one candidate, and this is all for multi-candidate elections, you can vote for, say there's 3 candidates there, you can vote for just one of them, or 2 of them. You could even vote for 3 of them, but that would be worthless because it'd be the same as voting for none of them. So that's the 2 different voting systems. Now, why is instant runoff voting 1,000,000 times better? I have 4 reasons why it's superior to approval voting. 1, IRV is better at measuring the true wishes of voters. 2, it is more advanced because you're allowed to rank your candidates in order of preference. 3, instant runoff voting has a proven track record. And 4, I can't do all positive things. We have to have a contrast here, so I have to go negative a little bit. Sorry. Approval voting violates all 3 principles of fair voting systems. And I will go into each one specifically over the rest of my speech. So let's start with the first one. Instant runoff voting measures the true wishes of voters. In the first part, instant runoff voting differentiates who voters like more because you get to rank them. On the other hand, approval voting, all the votes are equal. So you may get the vote for 2 or 3 candidates, but you can't say I like this one better than this one. You're just stuck with the yes-no vote. It's binary, 0s and 1s, or 1s and 0s. Second part is instant runoff voting. The first round of voting shows the true preferences of the voters. That's who they really want. However, in approval voting, it does not show the true preferences of the voters. In fact, even if you were to just analyze one person's vote, you'd see him voting for 3. He's like, I like these 3, but how much do I like these 3? Do I like the first one, the most, and the next ones are like distant second and third, or are they all equal? You can't differentiate between those. And the last reason why it's a better measure is that in instant runoff voting, all the mental calculations you have to do is just ranking your preferences. Which one's your first choice, second choice, third choice. However, in approval voting, you have to do all kinds of internal decision making, which makes it complicated internally. You might ask yourself questions like this. I call this the reverse spoiler effect. Will a vote for my distant second choice hurt my first choice? Whereas the spoiler effect is, will a vote for my first choice hurt my second choice? So that's a difficult question. The next difficult question is, does my second or third choice meet my approval threshold? Maybe you agree with your second and third choice 60% and then 40%. Well, is your threshold 50%, there you vote for 2, or is it 30%, you vote for 3 of them? You have to figure out what your threshold is. You may not be consciously asking these questions, but unconsciously or subconsciously, you have to answer these questions before you vote for each one. So it's not as simple as they make it seem. The second reason why instant runoff voting is superior to approval voting is that instant runoff voting is more advanced. It has the upgrade of ranking your votes, which makes it more advanced. Whereas approval voting, it's still the one-size-fits-all vote, and so there's no differentiation between who you like more. I clearly like Libertarian more than I would like Greens or Republicans, but approval voting does not include that, whereas instant runoff voting does. The third reason why instant runoff voting is better is because it has a proven track record. Instant runoff voting is being used all over the world. It's being used in the United States, Ireland, Australia, they use it to elect their president. England, they use it to elect the mayor of London. So it's been used for all over the world. Specific cities in the United States, which is the most important to us. Is it being used here? San Francisco, big city. Minneapolis just use it, big city. And there's Portland, Maine, and several other smaller towns are actually using instant runoff voting too. So we have competitive elections and data on how it works. On the other hand, approval voting has not been used in the public election for 2,000 years. There's some, I'm always curious about what Art has to say about this, because he says, well, there's something that was kind of like this in Russia. I think it was disapproval voting, which is just the opposite of approval voting. So that's interesting. I'd like to see the data on it, but right now, I'd like to see how it goes over 3 different election cycles, what it evolves to. He kind of showed how plurality voting devolves into a duopoly. I'd like to see the effects that approval voting has. There's just no data out there, so I'm just curious about it. Also, it says right here, largest private association that used it, it reverted back to bullet voting. That's what I'm concerned about, where people go, my second choice is hurting my first choice, so I'm just going to vote for one. Alright, and the last part, which is a little bit on the negative side, but I don't think of it as contrasting instant runoff voting from approval voting, is that approval voting violates the 3 major rules of fair voting systems. It violates majority rule. A candidate can win despite having the least amount of first choice support, and in some cases it can punish honest voters. Instant runoff voting isn't perfect here, but approval voting certainly isn't any better. Alright, I made some plausible scenarios here. I did it with 100 voters so you can look at it kind of like percentages here. So you got 39 Dems, 51 Republicans, and 10 Libertarians. The Republican clearly has a majority, 51% basically. But when you have approval voting, they can vote for more than one. So when you do the tally, the Democrat ends up winning. When someone has a majority here in instant runoff voting, it would end right there. But here it allows the non-majority win, so it violates majority rule right there. But there's another way it violates majority rule as well. The next way is that no one has a majority at the beginning. So instant runoff voting obviously knocked this one off, so someone ended up with a majority. But with approval voting, let's say it ends up being bullet voting like it did with the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers. They ended up bullet voting, and still, no one has a majority with 3 candidates there. So there's no requirement for majority rule there. The next one is the candidate with the least amount of first choice supporters can end up winning in the end. And it shows right here. It's off with 40, 45, 10, and 5 green. In instant runoff voting, this person is eliminated first, their votes are transferred to the other 3 candidates. However here, and you can go through the numbers later, they all come out, and you end up with the green winning. So here, least amount of first choice support, but he has a lot of second choice support, so he ends up winning. So it violates that. You don't have people who really like him, just all like, not a bad third choice. So, violates second rule. The last one is a situation where it actually punishes voters for being honest. Now this can happen, it's probably not the most common thing ever, but the same situation that he was talking about with instant runoff voting, where you have a close election. When you have a close election, and a lot of these people, say like the 49 Republicans, realize that their second choice going for Libertarians here, 25 of them voted for both. They go, wait a second, voting for my second choice is hurting my first choice from winning. So they're going to start bullet voting once they start looking at the polls, because everyone's going to announce, oh my goodness, it's looking like a tight race, and the Republicans and Libertarians are getting really close, and they go, we're going to start bullet voting. So it just devolves back to bullet voting, and people aren't voting for who they really want. So it hurts the honest voters. And I'd just like to summarize my speech here. In conclusion, the 4 reasons why instant runoff voting is a million times better than approval voting is that instant runoff voting measures the true wishes of voters. 2, it is more advanced because of the ranked choice aspect. 3, it has a proven track record across the world. 4, approval voting violates majority rule, the first choice support rule, and it punishes honest voting. And I would like to finish by emphasizing one last point. Instant runoff voting measures the true wishes of the voters. And that ought to be the #1 criterion for selecting a voting system. IRV is clearly superior to approval voting in this single most important respects. Thank you again for your attention, and be ready to take some questions. I also have some pamphlets to pass out. So, thank you.
Please have questions.
I think we can both stand up here and
Yeah.
get grilled by
Yay.
the Supreme Court or something.
Annette, do you want to just stand up and ask?
For Arthur, when you have it more than one possibilities, doesn't that almost always guarantee there will be a runoff?
No, there's no runoff at all. It's just you mark all the ones that you think are valid for the office. So basically you select all the people you approve for the office. If you want them to be able to get in office and are okay with it, you mark them off, and then whoever gets the highest number wins. It's that simple.
But isn't it more likely that you will have a lesser majority with the 2?
You can't really get, are you saying you, I don't know what you're saying.
Well, when you have,
You'll always have a majority.
but you may not always have the 51, and maybe a majority of like 40, and that's, if you've got 2 or 3, you may
Well, if
not
you-
have the 50% or 51% that you need to be the winner. Is it more likely, without ranking, that it's gonna automatically be a runoff?
You're saying like, comparing it to our current system, you're saying like it get 33, 33, 33, you ended up with that. Well, our current, this is something I actually looked up. What races in Texas are runoff races? Did you?
Statewide races, there are no runoff in
Yeah.
races for statewide. But for city races, we have what's called the top 2 runoff. So
Yeah.
you do plurality voting, the top 2, then go to a runoff. So we have 2 different systems: city, top 2 runoff; state, plurality.
But what you're saying is not likely to happen in approval voting. And even if you did, you still take whoever gets the most votes. It's straightforward.
And for you, a question, would this take longer to come out with the final results, to where instead of like the night of, maybe the next day you'd have to find the results? How much longer would it take to get the result answers?
I can tell you how they've been doing it. They've been using paper ballot. I've just recently gotten into what they're using in Minnesota and San Francisco. They've been using a paper ballot with the scanner. So it has been taking a little bit longer there, but there's no reason to. Software can easily take care of it. And something he mentioned, if I may do a little bit of what do they call that, a rebuttal, is he said it all has to be tabulated in a central location. There's no reason why each vote can't be tagged with the precinct, so that you would know what precinct it comes from. So maybe it gets tabulated in the middle, but you would know what precinct it comes from. There's no reason for that. That may be the way to do it now, but it doesn't have to. But to answer your question, no, it shouldn't take any longer. In fact, if computers end up doing all of it, you can calculate it immediately, and if someone questions it, then if we have receipts for everything, then you could double check it too later on down the line and say, this is the official one, there's going to be a valid recount. So it can do it just as fast as anything else. It's all done, if it's done by machine. It just depends on what voting system you use.
The only thing you have to wait for is all the tabulations from all the different areas to come in. That's what you're waiting on. The computer can do it instantly.
We were at an event today.
We had two
Oh, you already
other
asked?
questions
Oh, you're
asked
just gonna take
before
turns?
you.
Go ahead.
My question's for James. Wouldn't it be a simpler process to continue with our current system, just allow more people on the ballot?
In our current system, we already allow many
Oh.
people on the ballot. For example, in San Antonio, we had between 5 and 10 people run for mayor. So it's not a matter of allowing more people on the ballot. And the example that he showed was in Colorado, where they allowed, 20 people
That was a
on
lot.
the ballot? So they can allow more people on the ballot, but when you do
But
that,
then we have states like Oklahoma where
right,
you
they
can't
don't.
even get on the ballot.
Certainly you want to allow more people on the ballot, I agree. But once
Well,
you
ballot
do,
access, I think, is sort of a
Yeah.
separate.
it's a separate issue, but once you do allow more people on the ballot, the plurality system breaks down. Plurality system doesn't work with more than 2 people being elected because there's no majority rule. There's no way to figure out a runoff, and top 2 runoff is just a really bad way of doing the system. So it's specifically, if you want to allow more people on the ballot, you have to fix the voting system. You cannot continue the voting system we have with many people on the ballot. It just doesn't work as well.
Well, my question to Arthur, wouldn't that end up the same way as your system? If we have, say, 15 people on the ballot, everybody gets, you get 1 vote for whoever you like the best. And it ends up being 10%, 15%, 20%, 9%. Whoever had 15% wins.
Well, it
Correct.
doesn't really work by percentage in approval voting. It works by highest vote count. Because remember, you can vote for multiple people. So I can vote for A and C, and that counts as A
Right.
gets 1 for me and C gets 1 for me. So it doesn't really work if you think about it in percentages as much anymore, because the combinations are however many people you have on the ballot.
But still, the highest number gets the win in your system, correct?
Yes.
So even if it's not a plurality, it's not a simple 51% winner.
It basically works out to whoever gets the most votes.
Right.
So I would still say, I'm hesitant to use the word majority because it's weighted with other meanings, but if that number's higher because that many people, the most of all the voters voted for that choice A. Choice A got 1,500 votes because they got 1,500 people that marked that box. Now, other people might have marked other boxes, but less people marked the other boxes. So that's why it gets it. That's fair to the maximum number of people because they chose it. And it doesn't, if you mark the box, you wanted them in office. If you didn't mark a box, it's your fault. You didn't want them in office. That couldn't be any possibly more straightforward than that.
I want to start with a brief comment, and that is that when I went to from medical school to my residency school, they used a matching program, which is basically an instant runoff. The programs listed, the patient, the medical students they wanted accepted as doctors in training, 1, 2, whatever, down to the bottom. And the students listed the programs they had applied to. Assume that, say, the programs had 20 slots and they had 80 people apply. They listed people 1 through 80. The students applied to 5 different programs. They listed the programs 1 through 5. And out popped on match night 165 people. We all were sitting there anxiously waiting to see where the hell we were going. And there were 3 or 4 unlucky bastards. And everybody else knew where they were going. And this seems like instant runoff. So this is another example of what James mentioned. I'd like to ask each of you to comment on approval versus instant runoff. Does my example, real world example of what I experienced as a medical student going to residency and what my son is about to experience as a medical student, as a college graduate in the state of Texas, applying to 8 different medical schools in Texas, which uses also a match system to pick the in-state residents. Is this, would approval voting be better than this? But this is another real world example
Can I ask
of
you
the
a
instant
question?
runoff.
There were multiple spots to fill when those votes came back, right? It wasn't like all those residents were looking for fighting over a single spot.
Well, yes, each residency program needed to fill its spots, and each student needed to find a place to go train to be a doctor.
So you were really creating a preference list for who gets first preference.
Yeah, which I
It was-
see
it
is
was a little
like
both.
it's like the instant runoff voting.
This
So
is a little
so
bit of both.
let me ask Arthur to address that as to how approval voting might be better if applied to that system.
Well, that, if you're trying to do preference rankings, I would actually, approval voting is a subset of range voting, where you actually weight people. But the reason I'm not recommending range voting is it's more complex. I think it would confuse people. It comes out better than approval voting, but approval voting is, your range is 0 and 1. But so, in what you were trying to do though, I think you were trying to place people by who gets the first selection into the residency spot they want to go to, right?
Well, we call it a match because we were trying to make both entities, both sides, as happy as possible.
Well, I think approval voting wouldn't be used in that specific case because you're trying to do something more complex than just fill a single position. And I wouldn't recommend approval voting for that.
Can I say something there? I think it's actually a combination of approval voting and instant runoff voting, which makes it extra interesting. Now, from the college's point of view, they have 20 spots, they have 80 applicants. So they have to fill, or they're going to fill all these 20 spots. So they're basically using instant runoff voting. They try and get their top choices, and they end up matching it with the preferences of the students. However, the students, they get to use almost a form of approval voting, because if they apply to these schools, that's their approval vote. It's like, I approve of these 5 schools, was your example. And then within those approvals, they actually got to rank what they approved. So it was, from the student side, is a combination of the approval voting. These are the colleges, the medical programs I approve of, and within the ones I approve of, I get to rank them. So that's pretty cool. I think that would be an interesting case study to see how that works and tabulates. I'd have to think about it more, and it would be interesting to talk to the medical programs and the, I know it's the medical schools end up doing this match day thing, which I've actually attended a match day. It's kind of cool to see that. But how they end up tabulating it between the college's wishes and the students' wishes, that's, I don't know how they do the interchange, the selection process. So like I said, it's a combination of the two.
And Brent had a question?
Yes. I was gonna ask, seemed like a good question, but now I'm really concerned. What if you have a runoff, or you wanna have a recount? And, how are we ever going to verify a recount? I mean, the system we have right now is, today, Annette and I were at a function, and, one of the people that came, it was a luncheon for the candidates, and one of the people that was there, I don't know if you remember her, Elizondo, Patty, and she was saying, you know, she just does not trust our electronic voting machines, and she wants to return to the paper voting machines, and we were talking about how could you do that, and could we do both? And if you're doing these more complicated systems and you want to do a recount, how do you do a recount?
Okay. Do you want me to start off with the answer and you can finish
Go
up
ahead.
on this one? I can go first this time. It's kind of a separate issue as far as validating the votes here, but both of our systems can easily be a paper ballot system where you can you'll have it tonight. If you want to, you can go and recount the ballots and make sure that we're being honest about the approval voting and the instant runoff. So it's a separate issue. You can do it either way, and you can solve that problem. The problem is that we have an entirely electronic system in San Antonio where there's no paper trail. So that's a problem with the voting system that Texas approved, which goes down to the counties. That's not a problem with any
Well,
individual
the last
voting
time
system.
San Antonio was using a paper count, it seems to me, there was one time when it took them 2 weeks to count the ballots here in San Antonio on a paper ballot. Do you recall that? That was about 10, 15 years ago.
Well, those like James said, are separate issues.
You can fix all that, it's not a
And
problem.
and no matter what voting system, we could look at that. To be negative towards IRV, I guess, I would say, no matter how many times you count it, like that chart I showed, I think voters would be dissatisfied because they don't understand it themselves. They would see that complicated calculation and they can't work through it themselves, and they would feel dissatisfied. And that goes into the Bayesian regret stuff. But
One more question and then,
Oh, I want to ask a question too.
okay,
Ladies first.
this is our special one.
The National Libertarian Party has 5 positions they fill by, they can have unlimited number of nominations, 20 or 20, 30 people, and you get 5 votes. If any one of those candidates receives over a majority of the votes, they're automatically elected. And if you're not filling all of them, then you have an additional round of voting to fill them. Is that approval? Is that insert?
Approval doesn't have additional rounds of voting. There's one round, that's it. I'm not.
So in approval voting, what would happen is you could vote for as many of them as you like, and the top 5 vote getters win, period. In instant runoff voting, that's a little bit different because that's a multiple winner election, and there are systems for instant runoff voting where you can do it for multiple winners. In fact, they're using it in Cambridge, Massachusetts for such a situation. I think it may be for 2 or 3 people get to win per district. So you can do it. It'd be more complicated. I'm not too familiar with that. I'm more familiar with single
Yeah,
winner elections, but you can do it.
The party rules say that you have to have a majority, so
Right.
you vote as many times as it takes, but I don't see where it would help or hurt having either one of these.
Well, with approval voting, you don't have any more. You just have one round. That's it.
It would be
And the other part you're talking about is what is it called? Percentage placement.
Yeah, and with instant runoff voting, what you could do is it sounds like there's 30 people there, so you can rank maybe, you might know 5 of them, so you might rank the 5 you know and just not vote any more than that because you don't know the other people. So there's some flexibility in there, but then it takes away the majority rule part where someone could win without a majority of voters.
In reality, I think most of us vote for less than 5 people. We vote for only the 1 or 2 we really approve of,
That's
and chips fall
right.
where they may on the rest.
Right. So there's certainly many more election systems than we have here, and many, like multiple winner elections. It can get a lot more complicated when you start doing that. A lot of people think it's good to have multiple winner elections. We have it for San Antonio River Authority, as I recall, for the at-large ones, where you get a multiple winner election, you get 2 at-large people. I think you only get to vote for 1 though. Still no approval voting.
One more question.
Or you get to vote for 2.
Okay, Americans, even with our simple system, seem to still have trouble voting sometimes, especially a concentration of people in Florida. Could both of you convince me that Americans could be taught how to vote in your respective ways?
Well, if you go
Does
with
that
the
make
stupidest
sense?
people, you want to go first?
I can go first, sure. With instant runoff voting, we have taught, people have been taught from all different ages, from elementary school students to people in their 80s and 90s, and so anyone can understand this. However, if you go in there not knowing how it works on election day, no one explains to it, there could be confusion there. It's pretty clear for anyone who pays attention to it, but yeah, someone can mess it up. I mean, someone can say, I'm going to vote for first, second, third choice of one person. Only their first choice is going to count. You can't vote for first and second choice, there's no point. So yeah, you can screw it up, but then the worst case scenario is you don't throw out the ballot. You just say, all right, we give you your first choice, and if your first choice gets eliminated, then it's like you didn't show up to vote. So it's no different than the top 2 runoff, where you don't show up for the second runoff. They just didn't select the second choice.
Okay.
And so really what we're talking about isn't, the hardcore voters, Republican, Democrat, that's not changing. We're talking about the people that jump around, the independent type voters, that's who we're concerned about here. I think once, even if they don't get it logically, once they realize intuitively, after maybe it might take several rounds of voting, but once they realize, oh, I don't have to play a game in my head, like I don't have to worry about who these other people are voting for, I can vote. Am I worried that the Democrat's going to win? I'll vote Republican, but I do like libertarians. Oh, I'll select a libertarian. The stress is gone. The idea that you can express yourself fully, and that's why I focused on expression so much, is extremely simple. I think they'll be satisfied with it. I think it's very straightforward. It looks almost like our current ballots. So if they mess up, if they're too stupid to use our current ballot, we can't fix that. You can't fix stupid. But I think the people that we are really worried about, we're fixing the problems with our current system, and we're trying to enable them to be free to express themselves, and that's what's being fixed. And I think they'll be happy with it.
Alright. So, thank you guys.
Oh, you gotta get a picture of James now.
Yeah.
Being cordial.
That's right.
Wait, keep
Yeah.
doing that for a while. Maybe I should stand up.
Are you about to punch people? What's you look like?
Okay.
Try a little more on there. Let's start off like this.
Alright, so now we have these ballots. And on the back you have three choices. There's instant runoff voting, there's approval voting, and then there's sticking with the current system. So, if you guys want, I think the best thing we can do is we'll try both instant runoff voting and approval voting. So for the first vote, we'll do instant runoff. If you want to pick, I guess you can only pick
Well,
two.
I was going to suggest that I can hand out pieces of paper so people can do
I
instant
was gonna say we
runoff
could just
voting.
do like one
So
in
you're
box.
at
You
one,
could
two,
do it, but I think it'd be better to have it separate because I can show you how it works for
Okay.
small elections. Like if we were to use it for the county convention, I can show you how it would work in a smaller election. It's very easy to count up and everyone can look at it.
Sure.
Well, I put
Okay.
an X